all a very good afternoon. I'll be talking about a very simple idea, an application of a neoclassical microeconomic tool to some aspects of constitution. So the title is an application of the laws of production. So from the tools of microeconomics, we are concentrating on the laws of production and applying it to the idea of production of democracy. So we have had brilliant sessions by Professor Reggie, who has helped to make us think about the Constitution as something more than just just as it is called, the highest law of the land, and a document that literally impacts, affects, binds, and governs the entire country. So it's more than that. It's beyond that. It's about it has a function. A constitution has a form and it has a function. Out of the multiple functions, one of the functions is to produce the central aspect of what a constitution is meant for, and that is democracy. So we are going to look at the talk from the prism of the production of democracy. Within democracy, there are multiple features of democracy. So we're going to just look at two specific interaction between the important pillars of fundamental rights and DPSP. So how do these two interact in order to bring forth an outcome, and that outcome, how does that help in furthering, developing, enhancing the whole idea of democracy? That's the central idea. Now, again, Professor Reggie gave us food for thought with regard to telling us that democracy is not necessarily the general will of the people, and that the general will of people is almost an impossibility to get at, taking from Kenneth Arrow's famous doctrine, the impossibility theorem. But then we also agreed that it is pretty much, maybe not an ideal democracy, maybe not the perfect general will, but definitely it's higher than any other institution that we've seen, any other type of governance that has existed. It is higher than that, enshrined within the design of the Constitution. So we have those building blocks about how to think about the Constitution. And with that background, if we can think for 2 minutes on this, on the literature on human development approach, because we will be looking at the interaction between fundamental rights and DPSPs, wherein we all know about what Professor Amartya Sen has, written and contributed. It's about, I'll read out what Professor Amartya Sen argues, that development should be reconceptualized. Stress on the word reconceptualized, as the enhancing of basic liberties that people enjoy and the elimination of major sources of unfreedoms. A term he defines as poverty, poor, economic opportunities, neglect, all of those constraints which leave people with marginalized or falling opportunities. So those are the set of unfreedoms that Professor Amartya Singh talks about. And that's where the question of socialism actually comes into focus, and the concentration and the big discussion on DPSPs come into focus. I would like to ask the very learned participants here, if you could, just try and think about this, that, in the developing literature of law and economics, international developments, because in India, in law, we are not looking at the constitution from law and economics. We are not, we really don't have that kind of a scholarship in India. My question to the participants, learned participants, is this: that why is there so much of an international focus on studying the constitution, Indian constitution, from a law and economics perspective, and somehow coming to a conclusion that like we saw with Professor Reggie's discussion also, and there's the multiple such papers, that a country that is so diverse like ours is really not compatible with the idea of socialism. There's multiple literature on that. Why so much of interest, one, in this scholarship, looking at India, and why advising that socialism is really not compatible? In fact, there are papers which say that constitutionalism and socialism are incompatible. Like they are just good words. Both are good ideas, but they don't work together. So I want to really know from, because most of you would be faculties of economics, or faculties of law, students of law. So why so much of interest of the international scholarship? Would you like to think about that? Central pays for investment and nations are keen to. Social structure is too complex. Okay. Social structure is too complex. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ma'am, my point of view is like while it comes to delivering, whether it is socialism or the mixed structure, sometimes that becomes very political. Like when it comes to getting the probable, outcomes which are actually desired outcome. At that point of time, sometime like politics play its role. Like the whenever, for example, in earlier lectures, I heard from you only that when it comes to delivering at the time of Corona, the government was, government has successfully completed its target. Whereas where it comes to delivering in certain other areas, government failed to do that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's a good thinking point. Yeah, that's a good. Thank you so much. Any other thoughts on this? Because of strong GDP. So our preamble calls us ourselves, socialist also. So if there's a strong GDP, then isn't that a good thing? We call ourselves socialists also, and we have a strong GDP. Look at global perspective, our relations with others. There can be so many reasons for our relationship with other nations to improve. So many reasons. If we agree with the superpowers, our relationship with them will improve. If we disagree, it will not. So how does that look like? True. And everything that we agree with, is that good for the country? See, so 13.5% growth rate. First quarter. No, this quarter, 13.5. Overtaken UK. How does it sound? Sounds great. Okay. How do we compare the living standards of Indians with Britishers? How do we compare that? So we are like fifth biggest. Yeah, all of that. So we have to really look deep and think deep, to understand what's going on. So that's the background. To me, if you ask why the socialism debate, why there is a fundamental contradiction between constitutionalism and socialism, is very clear. The private capital needs justification, right? Private capital needs space. Private capital needs market. Private capital needs the entire education market, the entire health market. So it's less about having good relations. It is less about the other areas. These are multi-crore markets. And if it is socialism, then hello, those markets are restricted to private capital. That doesn't work, right? Education, health, public utilities. If these are restricted, in socialism, they will be restricted, isn't it? They should be restricted. It doesn't work for private capital. So therefore, socialism is in contradiction with constitutionalism. I mean, the debate has gone that far. In fact, there's so much of criticism to, Schedule 9. I'm sure as students and professors of law, there is so much of criticism as far as Schedule 9 is concerned, because Schedule 9 actually, protected multiple legislations from judicial scrutiny, judicial review. Of course, Schedule 9 can work both ways. It can work towards crony socialism. It can work towards crony capitalism also. Anyway, so let's get back. These were backgrounds that I was trying to tell you, because the topic is DPSP, and DPSP has the ethos and the essence of socialism. And socialism we are discussing because it is pretty much, at least in the book, still, prevalent, and so we need to have a serious discussion on that. So, placing the argument after kind of coming out of the background that I tried to build is this. The present position of the production process of the democracy. So, constitution as a machinery, constitution as a product, constitution that has a certain function, certain outputs to perform, and that output, the central output, is democracy. That production process is what my paper is trying to look at. That production process is, as of now, restricted to a very, very important pillar, and that is the input of, as an economist, I call it an input in the production of democracy, the input of fundamental rights. If you go back to Amartya Sen's definition, clearly political rights are extremely important, but political rights are not optimally used in absence of economic rights. This is not a new discussion, not a new debate. It's a debate that has all through the important amendments, we witnessed it all through the important amendments. the most important amendments has been this conflict between the place and the position of DPSP vis-a-vis fundamental rights. So I'm looking at it from the point of view of two factor inputs combined together in order to produce democracy, because like the human development literature, developmental literature, capability literature tells us that political rights cannot exist without economic rights, and therefore there is an argument, it has been all through, that just like fundamental rights are therefore justiciable and accessible to the general citizenry, so should DPSP. That's the argument that I'm trying to make, and therefore exactly. So India is a welfare state. So therefore, to be a welfare state, to really justify a welfare state, the argument that I'm making is DPSP should therefore be treated like an input that can be made variable. So in microeconomics, we know that so if you're looking at the constitution as an interplay of demand and supply of rights and duties, you have a certain gentry that demands all of this, and there is a certain agency that supplies all of this. Then the constitution has to be responsive in terms of this demand and supply, this whole idea. So that's again microeconomics in nature. But then this demand is based on something that on the possibility of the supply, and the supply is based on the cost of production, and the cost of production will determine the production process. So from that logic, we come to the main idea of the production process of democracy. Point is, the two factors need to be seen as variable factors, and they become variable factors. I mean, why am I saying that DPSP is not a variable factor? Why is it a fixed factor? Because it's not enforceable. Okay, so that's the basic argument. Yeah, I've said this, and therefore to make DPSP accessible, more accessible, by making it enforceable, we move out of a short-run production function where one function is one input is fixed, and there's a possibility to look at a long-run production function where both the inputs become variable, and then we see what is happening to the level of the production of democracy, the rate of production of democracy, and the cost of the production of democracy. These are a few ideas that are within this framework. So like I said, the constitution is, yes, Dr. Thakkar, you have a question?
I don't know, but I have one just minute observation that DPSP is not enforceable as the fundamental right. But even right itself, like right to education, is there. But even we find the similarly illusion of the child labor. Similarly, we have right to food security, and we see hunger and many other problems. Even though earlier it was NREGS, but now we have Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee. Even we have that. So even it become legal, yeah, it become enforceable. Then also I think the things may not change. It depend upon the stakeholders. It depend upon the governance mechanism. So nowadays, if you see in a if you see in a cooperative federalism, each states are taking their responsibility of DPS, and they are competing with one another through the various diversified schemes, and that so that though it is variable, but it is becoming at least certain threshold, it is becoming fixed over and above different to different state capacities becoming the variable. I don't know, I may be wrong also, but that I found that idea.
Your observation is very correct, Dr. Thakkar, and so is Madam Tejaswini, Madam. Yes, both your observations are very correct. We'll get to that in a moment. Certain aspects of the DPSP have been made enforceable, yes, but there are major aspects of DPSP that are still, yet to be made enforceable, right? That's the argument. So those that have been made enforceable, clearly, I'm not looking at those aspects as the fixed factors, right? I'm looking at those aspects which have not been made enforceable as yet as the fixed factor. All right, so we've got an idea about a constitution itself is a competitive mechanism. All the features of the constitution, sets limits, sets competitions in order to get to better efficiencies. We've already seen this idea. Like I was telling you that there is, we've already gone through this part that that public choice theory tells us the idea that social choices, people who make social choices are self-interested. And because they're self-interested, those powers have to be limited. And that is why we have the whole idea of the constitutional design. And taking that idea a little further would be that this competitive constitution therefore needs to be responsive to the idea of, to the elasticity of demand and supply. It needs to be responsive. Why? Because then you have whatever equilibrium level of democracy gets to be decided by a given demand and supply, which ultimately is linked to actually the supply and then the cost and then the production, the production function. All of that, we can attain a high level of equilibrium when the elasticity is higher vis-a-vis the price of uh, of accessibility of either fundamental rights or DPSP. So that's the broad idea. These are the comparative features of the Constitution. All these constitutions, ensure the correct checks and balances. Again, the idea of elasticity and responsiveness is also affirmed by what Thomas Jefferson has famously said, again, if we quote, then look at constitutions with sanctimonious reverence and deem them like the Ark of the Covenant, too sacred to be touched. So yes, there needs to be some stability, but it has to be, responsive, and the equilibrium of democracy needs to keep on enhancing itself through this allocative mechanism of the Constitution, allocation of rights, allocation of resources, and reduction of the cost of production of these rights and resources. That's the general neoclassical model. So now trying to look at why the paper is trying to look at DPSP as a fixed factor, because the paper also says that when the right is enforceable, when the fundamental rights are enforceable, the price at which the fundamental rights is available to the citizenry would be lower compared to the price at which DPSPs would be available because of the simple fact that they're not enforceable. The major areas of I don't know whether I skipped a few things. The areas that are left out in the DPSPs, which have not been made enforceable as yet. So what Madam Tejaswani was talking about, what Dr. Thakkar was talking about, is exactly this: the DPSP evolution. We've seen 42nd Amendment, 44th Amendment, 86th Amendment, 97th Amendment. These landmark cases of Champakam, Duraijan, from the supremacy of fundamental rights to harmonious construction, to Golaknath, to Keshavanand Bharti. We've seen this debate on DPSP evolving. And like Madam Tejaswani said, that it's possible, to get judgments in favor of DPSPs also. So being very optimistic because of that, and feeling, wanting to really look at what is happening in terms of outcomes, because for economists, these are outcomes that matter. So because judgments, to some extent, therefore, accessibility of DPSPs has increased on the book. So in order to look at that, the first measure I tried to use for this, I would thank and recognize the center members who gave assistance with regard to some of these facts, is this, that we looked at 2021, so July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022, 1-year time period, wherein we looked at 1,203 Supreme Court cases, and from there we wanted to look at the cases that are pertaining to fundamental rights and DPSPs for this particular period. What was the reason for that? Because this was a very, very critical period in terms of the vulnerabilities, and therefore a very ripe time wherein had this idea of accessibility to the enforceability systems through the DPSPs, for the DPSPs, would have been responsive and elastic. It would show itself in the judgments. So what we found was a total of 113 judgments were found, because we were only looking at judgments pertaining to fundamental rights and DPSPs. And the outcomes are interesting. The outcomes are that there were 98 judgments pertaining to fundamental rights. There were 3 judgments pertaining to DPSPs, and there were 12 judgments pertaining to both. The intention is that a more, maybe looking at a larger time period can be taken in order to get the trends, the variations. But what we see is this, that but still we see that the numbers are very low, and the numbers are as far as DPSP is concerned, and they are more low in the context of this time period of 2021 and 2022, because that was a very, very vulnerable time. So this is one tool that was applied to really look at what is happening, moving through this evolution of DPSP in terms of the real ground situation. And the second tool that is used to really assess the DPSP, ground level situation, the way it's working out, is to look at some facts. So like I was trying to tell you, there's so much of information, but just some minimum thing. 2 things contrast here, very interesting. One is, of course, I'll repeat myself, India surpassing UK as the 5th largest economy. Our participants told us it is very great, and so on and so forth. Q1 GDP growth is 13.5%, but a little detailed, granular look will tell us that the real growth is actually 4%, and 13.5% is actually, because the base was very, very low, calculating it from the base. Trade, hotel, transport decreased by 15.5%, which employs 35% of the people. MSME has shrunk, unemployment CMI data, August 8.3, demand for Manrega this entire year increasing month on month. And the NCRB suicide rates show that 25% of the total suicides in the country come from daily wage workers. And in 2014, this number was 12%. So it has more than doubled between 2014 to 2022. So the idea is this, that within the reality of fifth largest economy surpassing UK, these also are the ground realities, right? So the granular detailing of the performance. So one performance is what's the mirror and reflection in the world, which is very important. And more important would be the reflection and the reality inside within the country on the ground. Further, if you look at some evidence, with regard to how programs and packages have been announced and implemented, all full credit to the government for that. But ground level impact has, okay, we can say everything, that's a huge country, so on and so forth. And, it's really not possible to have the ideal democracy, that's fine, but we appreciate the attempt. Yes, Madam Gitanjali, you're correct. And that's exactly what, I just discussed also just now. Thank you. So that's important, that's extremely important as far as the outward reflection is concerned, but the inward realities are also equally important. And if you look at the inward realities, we see poverty, which has well, post-COVID it will increase, but then there are studies which show that because of food security, because of PDS, because of the packages that were announced, and so on and so forth, because of the credit line as far as MSME is concerned, because of all that, the poverty in COVID times has been was reduced by a significant level. Otherwise, extreme poverty would have been very, very visible, which has not happened. So just shows how important the welfare state functioning is. Otherwise, across the sector, from the budgets, we see allocation for health, allocation for education, decline in the number of schools, increase in school dropouts, dependence on private health, decrease in consumption expenditure. So these are evidence-oriented facts of the Indian economy inside the broad picture of the so-called 13.5 growth and the fifth largest economy. And that's why. So are these things something we should not be proud of? Yes, we should be very proud of. But along with that, we need to also look at the importance of making DPSP justiciable. At least, the most pressing aspects that we see from here, for example, work, decent livelihood, equal wages for men and women, increase in the minimum wages, 178 rupees per day. So from that point of view, from the background structure, so two toolkits one can use to understand really the effect of the BPSPs on how it is impacting people's lives, and therefore the need for the enforceability, and therefore the argument that socialism and constitutionalism must coexist, at least for a country like India, with and is not necessarily contradictory in nature. This is the framework that is created for this whole idea of the market for democracy, the demand, supply, and production. By now, I've already told you this, that these are the stakeholders, the players, the agencies, and which determine the demand, and there is a set of costs, and those affect the production. That is broadly what this particular slide is trying to say. So therefore, there is a observation. Public health has gone down. Schemes, period, insurance is not paying premiums. Yes. So that's why the paper is wanting to look at trying to look at DPSPs more seriously, because that is the call of the hour, and not get too happy about some macroeconomic figures, surpassing UK. I'm waiting for the day when our per capita income surpasses UK. That would be something that we celebrate, really celebrate. The per capita, the average per capita income of India. Okay, so I've already discussed this, that fundamental rights therefore are more responsive as far as this market for democracy is concerned, because the prices are lower, but for the DPSPs, the prices are higher. And therefore the possibility, if both if the prices of both were accessible, the prices of both would have created a higher level of equilibrium. But because there's a price differential as far as citizenry is concerned in terms of access, the optimal equilibrium is not reached. There is a suboptimal level of equilibrium level of democracy, and we see that there is a on one side it is about the price and accessibility of the citizenry, and on the other side it is the idea of therefore within the constitutional framework of treating one factor as variable, a set of factors as variable, a set of factors as fixed. It's okay if some of the fundamental rights become enforceable. So that therefore is not the part of the DPSP that this paper is talking about. So there's this shortfall in the supply, and this shortfall in supply is because this fantastic argument that enforcing, making DPSPs enforceable is very costly. Does the country have adequate funds? Because there's always a cost constraint. Well, that's a different discussion for a different idea as far as these constraints are concerned. So point is that when this whole mechanism of one factor fixed, one factor variable happens, there's a suboptimal level of equilibrium that gets reached. These are the ways I've tried to kind of create the functions for fundamental rights and the functions for DPSPs. As far as functions of fundamental rights, it will be access price, large number of sellers, because it's a fundamental right, it's available. The whole idea of justiciability courts expectations. So therefore, this is elastic. DPSPs are non-justiciable. There is no substitute by way of which DPSPs can be ensured, other than rent-seeking activities which are not productive. For example, lobbying and all of that. Those agencies, those are rent-seeking. Those are really not productive. Judgments, because on basis of the function we looked at the judgments also, and this leads to a particular process of production, and we come to the neoclassical process of production that I spoke to you earlier, short run and long run. The paper goes on to say that the quantity of this production of democracy would be necessarily a combination of fundamental rights and DPSPs, both being treated as input factors, wherein fundamental rights are the variable factors and DPSPs are the fixed inputs. Students of microeconomics know the relationship between these two factors of production in the short run and in the long run. In the short run, what happens is you know, when you increase the variable factor, that means the fundamental rights. And also, if we go through the history of the Constitution, we see fundamental rights have been enhanced, but what happens to democracy if you have 10 or 20 or 30 fundamental rights? What happens? Because developmental economics, you know, this whole debate says that this entire literature establishes the fact that political rights cannot really shine and reach their optimal, productivity without economic rights. So therefore, this argument that as we increase the units of fundamental rights without the consequent enhancement of the economic right, not necessarily they have to be in equal proportion, but some minimum, and then it can evolve to a higher level, then this product of democracy will increase, initially reach an optimum, and then it will fall. And that's the constraint which I see to this honored idea of democracy and everything that it promises, and it really does promise. It will be constrained by this whole idea of one fixed factor and one variable factor. So this would look like, you know, if we make a particular graph with the shortened production function and we look at units of democracy and fundamental rights, we see the total quantity of democracy, yes, increasing, but see the rate at which it increases. So it increases and then falls. Not only that, but the rate at which it increases keeps on falling. So that's also something which is detrimental to the whole idea of democracy. We would want democracy to be nourished, you know, both in quantitative and qualitative terms. So there's an alternate in a production function in the neoclassical economics, and that is about the long-run production function, which states that with time, and then with time, we've had enough time, 75 years. So with time, you know, the factory, the project can vary its fixed factor, can buy the second factory, the 10th machine. That's the fixed factor that can be varied. And when you do that, then your output increases at lower cost. That's the fundamental idea. And because your output can increase at lower cost, at falling cost, therefore what happens to production? What happens to production is this, that over a period of time, you know, when you use both the factors as variables, then over a period of time, the production of democracy can really move into the phase of expansion path that we understand, you know, the economically viable region in which both the factors combine themselves for optimal output. And this optimal output and this expansion path of democracy is something that I am arguing in this particular paper. So that would these are some technicalities, you know, for the long run production function. We use the concept of isoquants, and isoquants are, you know, when you use two factors and you use them in a varying proportion, and there is a certain rate of change in that particular combination. So this is about that, the marginal rate of technical substitution of FRs and DPSPs. Is it about substituting? It is not about substituting. It is first about making it available. The whole fact that these two are available, and then the state, the policy can, can increase the use of one and decrease the use of other in terms of justiciability. For example, in COVID times, if you look at the COVID times in particular, this substitution happened, but to me in a very incorrect manner. There was restrictions as far as fundamental rights were concerned, but they were not equivalent additions as far as the components of DPSP are concerned. Had that happened, then if we look at the indifference curve technique or the IC curve, in consumption, then we would have seen that the welfare doesn't fall. That is again a microeconomic idea. It would not have fallen, but that is only possible when it is possible to produce more of democracy at a lower cost, and that would be possible with the application of isocons rather than the short-run production function, which is known as the law of variable proportions. So that primarily is the argument, and then this is how, in terms of microeconomics and the graph and the diagram, you have the possibility of combining both the fundamental rights and the DPSPs. Again, like, the combinations can vary. They can, and this can be constrained to what we understand as a budget constraint, the ISO cost line that we understand in microeconomics. So that can be put and it can be determined. And then, so first is you start at 150 production of democracy, and then with time, like I said, beyond 75 years, we have the possibility of being on this expansion path, and see not just expansion path, but this whole idea of economies of scale, like in the long run, how costs can diminish, which means that with lesser inputs, one can get higher output, So the cost, when you say lesser inputs, we're actually talking, increasing returns to scale. We're actually talking about, falling costs of the inputs, but higher production, higher output. So we can move from 100 to 200 to 300 over a period of 75 years. This would bring forth that missing strength and spirit of democracy that can come through enforceable DPSP. Again, I know, constitutional law experts will say that DPSP is limitless. How would it be possible to factor in all of that within a budget constraint? All right, understandable. But just like few aspects have been brought into the enforceability, it's time now that at least seeing the macroeconomic evidence that we saw in terms of 25% suicide by daily wage workers, increased, doubled. The clear signals, clear statistical evidence tells us that those parts of the DPSP is time that it comes under the possibility of enforceability. So the argument of the paper is this, that, maybe not the entire of DPSPs at a time, but those areas which are asking for help, that are crying out for help, shrinking MSMEs, why MSMEs have shrunk even after the, the credit link schemes and so on and so forth. Where is the data about the informal economy? We don't even know that. We're talking about 13.5 growth rate, but there is no data on the informal sector. We don't even know post-COVID, what is the recovery, all of that. But anyway, 25% suicide is a good enough indication. And therefore, I conclude with this argument that there's the whole of microeconomics has been used in law and economics to make one argument, the efficiency argument. And if we see the literature, and not just literature, if we see policy and the law, we see that law and economics has been the central pillar of privatization, globalization, liberalization, central pillar, you know. But then there is a lot in law and economics, in microeconomics, that can be the same tools that also can be applied to make an alternate argument. And when I teach law and economics, I always tell my students that, India is our country, and, we need to create the Indian jurisprudence of law and economics, which means that these tools are available, it can be applied to make alternate arguments. But for that, we need to know the ABCD of this language, which is so familiar in the developed world and yet developing in India. And because we don't, maybe, we don't have it institutionalized in our courses, which is a tragedy. And so we don't know this. And because we do, it's like, it's like those times, let's say colonial India, when, colonial India, when we did not have education, especially the education in law. Very few people or just some elites could understand or study law. Otherwise, most of the common people did not, and see the consequences. Similarly, law and economics is also developed as another super specialized tool, which, since it's not taught in India, in all law schools and in all schools of economics, very few. So this, and what is not taught, which has become actually the single most important idea, which is implemented in terms of the law over the last 50 years in the developed world, and from 1990, or let's say 1985 onwards in India. And we don't know about it. We can't read, we don't understand. So therefore, this whole Center for Law and Economics is way more than a course and a conference. It's about getting this language, understanding it. I keep thinking about this, WTO, we could not take strong stance because we did not have very strong. So whether it's colonial or recent time period, we did not understand those complicated laws and discussions that were happening. And then we had those, trained, super specialized lawyers from our side also. And then we took that stand, and, we knew what's happening. Similarly, that's what law and economics is. There's plentiful of logic, theory, arguments, and it has to be used as per the Indian jurisprudence of law and economics. So with that, I'll conclude. And if you have any questions, please. Madam Gitanjali, so what has been measured, is the judgments, and that too only 1 year, and that too is my center students who've done it. It's a work in progress, and as far as expansion path and elasticity is concerned, it's just a theoretical application as of now. I hope to be able to put measurable methods to this theory. It's a work in progress. Madam Chauhan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm sorry, I saw the message just now. All right, thank you very much. I'll get back to you once this is over, completed with some more, more work on it.
Ma'am, actually, you know it, right? I'm not from law and economics background. My background is only economics. So I was just wondering that how...
That's the whole thing. I mean, we cannot be from law or from economics anymore. See what's happening. The same, Professor Reggie used pretty much the same idea of public choice theory, and he pretty much convinced us to one position, right?
Yeah.
There are alternate arguments. So we have to know.
No,
And
I was just wondering that how these judgments, how we quantify based on the judgments, like how we come to the conclusion, like in binary, like that's what
so
I
so
was
that was simple, we just asked a question, whether this is related with fundamental rights or is this related to DPSP. So on some reading of the judgment, one gets the answer, right? Like,
Yeah.
has it taken up a matter on DPSP? So that, but then and then you can make a measure of it, like what we saw, the numbers that we found in DPSP. And of course, the other measure would be all your macroeconomic indicators. And this elasticity and all that, I have a few ideas how to kind of implement it into measurable forms. In time, I hope to do it. And then I'll share it with you.
Great, ma'am. Ma'am, I will discuss with you later on. I thought that I was just wondering that all these, if I talk about management, we have a structure questionnaires and through which we, quantify the data, qualitative data into, we quantify that also. But I was wondering that what we exactly do in law, and that is that is why I ask you this question. Maybe I'll discuss that with you or
Okay.
take your answer afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for your interest. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Thakkar.
If any questions are there, first we can take them, and then if I may. So what is your view on freebies versus DPSP?
So there are no questions from participants?
So let them think. Meanwhile, I'm asking, what is your view on freebies versus DPSP? Because that is right now going on, and you want to even enforce it. And I already told, enforcing will just give a legal right. But how far in actual sense from state to state? Because it is not though it is the state to state determine the federalism of different state, how they implement the various scheme at, yeah, how they come out with the directive state policies at the different state, and then maybe based on their local requirement and that. So. And freebies is very important for the DPSP. Like one of our colleague was discussing, I think, about the Ayushman Bharat scheme, where which may be very relevant at the time of COVID, and he was telling something counter that what is happening. So, what do you want to say accordingly?
So for many answers actually. First is of course that when we say competitive federalism, we have to really look into the details of it. Is it competitive? Is it fair? For example, I think in 2021 that 1 lakh crore uh, that was allocated for states as far as lending was concerned. In that, there was a condition for 30 years. Uh, for any capital expenditure that you undertake with this particular loan amount, you take the permission of the uh, central government. So after that, it was seen that a set of states, went into taking of that loan, and a set of states did not. Whereas the other set of states that did not, I mean, I don't have to really specify which states did not. They were resort to market borrowing. You understand? The point is very, very simple. That is it cooperative, competitive federalism that we are talking about? So deep down, clearly that's not the case. That's one. Second is we need to remember that as long as the constitution, gives us this idea that we are a welfare state, then that is still there. That has not been erased, that's still there. So if it's a welfare state, then the two things. One, if there are welfare programs, then freebies are not required. But which welfare programs? At the mercy, as an obligation, as a crisis response, or as a right? That's the basic question. As an obligation, as mercy, as any of that, or as just a civic right. So if it's a democracy, then it is a right. So it is a right-based argument. Primarily, exactly what would happen with right to food is primarily that. And the third answer here would be, we have to define what a freebie is, isn't it? We have to define it. And we have to see that freebies come in a certain social economic context. So until that social economic context is rectified through enforceability of economic rights, this definition of freebie will always be very ambiguous. If I do it, it's a freebie. If you do it, it is all right. That ambiguity needs to go away, and that can happen through a right-based approach.
Anyone have any question? Yeah.
All right, there are no questions, and I have concluded in time. All right. So Khushi, please take over.
Yes, ma'am. If there are no further questions from the participants, we would like to end this session for today. Thank you so much, ma'am and sir, for your time, and all the participants.